Okay, let's be real. There's almost nothing worse than seeing that check engine light pop on, especially when your car starts shaking and sputtering. It's frustrating, right? Well, if your Toyota is giving you a P1605 code, you've come to the right place. Today, we're going to pull the curtain back on this code and figure out what's really going on. Does any of this seem a little too familiar? The engine shaking while you're at a stoplight? Maybe the RPM needle is doing a little dance, or worse, the engine just cuts out completely when you stop. These are the classic signs, the telltale symptoms of a rough idle, and they're exactly what sets off that P1605 code. So, here's our game plan to get that engine purring again. First, we'll break down what the code actually means. Then, we'll talk about why it's a symptom, not the cause. This is a big one. After that, we'll go on a little hunt for the usual suspects, lay out a clear diagnostic blueprint, and finally talk about the fix and the final checks. All right, first things first. Let's translate what your car is trying to tell you. When that P1605 code shows up, what is the engine control module, the car's brain, actually saying? So, the official name is engine rough idling. But here's the important detail. Your car's computer is constantly watching the engine speed. If it sees the RPMs drop below 400 for more than 5 seconds, especially right after you start it up, bang, it triggers that light. It's not a guess, it's a very specific measurement. And that leads us to probably the single most important idea in this entire explainer, the difference between a symptom and the actual cause. Getting this is the key to not wasting your time and money. Okay, check this out. Most engine codes, say a P0101, point you right to a specific part, in this case, the mass airflow sensor. It's basically saying, hey, this part is broken. But P1605? It's what we call an informational code. It's not telling you what broke. It's just reporting the symptom, the rough idle. The best analogy is a fire alarm. The alarm isn't the fire, right? It just tells you there is a fire somewhere in the building. Our code is the alarm. So, if the code is just the alarm, our job is to become detectives and find the fire. Why is the engine shaking in the first place? Let's go through the most common culprits. Suspect number 1, and honestly, the most frequent cause, is an airflow issue. See, your engine's computer is obsessed with getting the air-to-fuel ratio just right. If extra air that the computer doesn't know about sneaks in, say through a tiny crack in a vacuum hose or around a gunked-up throttle body, it throws that whole perfect recipe out of whack. And the result? The engine stumbles and shakes. Now, air is only half of the equation, right? So if the airflow seems fine, the next place you gotta look is the fuel delivery. If you have a weak fuel pump, a clogged filter, or dirty fuel injectors, the engine might not be getting enough gas to mix with the air. It's the same result, just a different cause, a bad air-fuel mixture that leads to an unstable, rough idle. And finally, we've got a couple other possibilities. 1, the computer itself could be getting bad information. A dirty mass airflow sensor might be underreporting how much air is actually coming in. Or 2, the problem could be more direct, like a failing spark plug or ignition coil. When a cylinder misfires, it creates a literal shake in the engine that the computer can easily detect, and then it reports it to you with that friendly P1605 code. Okay, so we know the likely suspects, but how do you actually track down the right one? Let's put together our diagnostic blueprint. This is your step-by-step plan to get to the bottom of this. Pay close attention here because step 1 is the most important rule of all. Check for other codes. I can't stress this enough. If you also have, say, a P0301 code for a cylinder 1 misfire or a P0171 code for a lean condition, stop. Fix that problem first. Those are the specific codes, the fire, and fixing them will almost always clear up the informational P1605 code. If you have no other codes, then you can start moving down this list, starting with the easiest and most common stuff, like looking for vacuum leaks. Speaking of vacuum leaks, here's a great little pro tip. Trying to find a tiny crack in a hose with just your eyes can be really tough. So what mechanics will do is they'll start the engine and then carefully spray a little bit of something like starter fluid around the vacuum hoses. If the engine speed suddenly changes, if it revs up or smooths out for just a second, that's because the spray just got sucked into the leak. And boom, you found your culprit. All right, so you followed the plan, you've done your detective work, and you found the problem. Maybe it was that cracked hose or a dirty sensor. Now for the final step, making the fix and doing the final check to make sure the problem is really, truly gone. So once you've replaced the part or cleaned the component, you're not quite done. You need to grab a scanner and clear the codes from the computer's memory. This gives it a totally clean slate. Now, sometimes, especially if you cleaned the throttle body, you might need to do what's called an idle relearn. This just lets the computer recalibrate itself to the new clean airflow. And then finally, the best part, the test drive. This is your victory lap to confirm that the idle is silky smooth and that pesky check engine light stays off for good. So, we end up back where we started. That P1605 code, it's not a dead end. It's actually the starting point. It's a clue. It's your car's computer basically tapping you on the shoulder and saying, hey, something's making me shake over here. Can you please figure out why? So the real question isn't what the code is, it's what is that code trying to tell you about the real problem hiding underneath?